Alright. I'm Natalie. I'm B.
I'm Kellen. I'm C.
I'm Christy. I'm A.
I'm Tristan. I'm E. And I'm Lauren. I'm D. The dog.
Close the window. Okay, first on our agenda is the Community Assets Map draft discussion, which means that we're supposed to talk about what is community asset mapping and what defines a strong community. Yay!
Okay, what defines a strong community, and what was the first one?
What is community asset mapping?
That's a great question. What is community
I've
asset mapping?
actually kind of read through it a few
Yeah.
times, and I'm
Me
still
too, and
a
I
little
still don't
confused.
really understand what it is.
It's like we're observing a community, and then finding a way to strengthen it?
I think we're just taking down notes on what different assets of the community.
And what makes it
If
strong.
you scroll
Yeah.
down on the PowerPoint, it gives you an example of what it's supposed to look like.
Oh, fancy.
So basically, we're just observing a community.
If I spill this on myself in the video, golly, I'll make it my screensaver.
So we just have to look at the different local institutions, citizen associations, gifts of individuals.
But I thought we're picking one community.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all in one
This
community.
is all about one community.
So the community
Oh, this is an
we're
example of
thinking about is the
Yeah. That's just what it's
Meadows.
gonna look
Sterling
like.
Meadows.
So if we're doing Sterling Meadows, it'll be okay, what school and college
And
is
then
there?
there's the-
Businesses and industries.
Where is Sterling
What
Meadows?
health services?
Where is it?
Yeah.
It's
Over by Alderwood?
yeah, it's
Not
near
the
Alderwood.
town, but the school.
Yeah,
Up
it's
near
near
the
Alderwood. It's
airport.
about 15 minutes away.
Okay, we could do Sterling Meadows.
Is the significance of that map is it the middle is really important, and then it goes to
Or is it
more
just,
broad?
I think this is
Like
individual and it
individual,
gets bigger and bigger,
and then more
because schools and
people.
colleges are way bigger than block clubs and people.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, this is the people within the community, and then as further you get out, the
This
further
is
away
the
from
groups of
the
people, and
community
this
you
is the
get.
actual
Yeah.
community.
Does it matter if another group is also doing Sterling Meadows?
I
doubt it.
I hope
Do you know if another group's just doing it?
about it.
I know. I was
I think it's okay if more than one group does one place. I'm sure Sterling Meadows probably gets it a lot because
Right.
it is one of the
It's like an
Practicum,
ELL sort of
yeah.
place we're all
Yeah.
drawn to.
Hey, should we pause this and check and make sure we can be heard on it?
I do this with my 405.
Perfect, we're good then. Sounds good. I was just before we do the entire thing.
Okay, so we also need to talk about more what makes a strong community.
No,
Or-
sorry, that's actually a definition that they have on here.
Okay,
It's just
cool.
talking about what a strong community is. The next thing is, how do you define community and neighborhood? Define characteristics of each and start to think about which community and what Karskagi you would like to focus on.
well,
So what's the difference between community and neighborhood?
I think a neighborhood is more just the buildings and
The
the houses and the
location.
location and in the area or whatever buildings and stuff are in the area. Whereas the community are actually the people within it that
Right.
make it up.
The community is maybe more of not a tangible thing that you
Yeah.
can touch. It's more of just a feeling kind
Whereas
of
the neighborhood's
thing.
a geographical
Yeah.
location area.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I bring it up every discussion, but the deaf community,
Uh-huh.
you can be in a neighborhood, but then the deaf community is much larger than where you
Right.
live. It
Mhm.
is kind of this not sort of tangible thing.
Yeah.
Communities can also be smaller than the area where you live. You can have a community within a neighborhood though.
Yeah,
oh,
exactly.
this is this community.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, and we
Like a
want to do
homeowners
Sterling Meadows.
association.
How about you find out this information? What websites and resources might you go to?
Well, you can go to Meadow Top or whatever their website is. Or just talk to him. I know he probably won't remember me because people go in all the time. But he
Right.
said that if I ever wanted to come back and help again, I could. So I just have to email him. And
Who
probably
is this guy?
Francisco. He's the guy that runs the. Him and this other woman kind of run the homework club there. But we want to do the whole. Are we thinking of the community as in because the people that I worked with were just the students in the homework club.
Yeah, we're talking about everyone. We're
Yeah,
talking
the
about
whole community, yeah. So the woman that works there, I also have her email.
Do we have the ELL specialist? It could be find, is there an ELL specialist? Because that's the big thing is we're supposed to have the ELL specialist and communicate with them.
like someone, what's the ELL specialist?
In Sterling Meadows community or whatever.
There's
elementary
supposed to
schools
be
there and stuff.
an
Like I don't
ELL
know if they
specialist
have
in
one
every community.
specific one, but like he can.
It says finding and collecting resources. It says find the ELL specialist. So probably just one specific, like one.
I
I
know,
know,
but
but,
like
like-
with the kids in Spanish and like back and forth. And, like,
So, for example, that really confuses me because if we chose a different community that we defined community, what
Yeah.
if they didn't have an ELL specialist?
Well, there's I don't know.
You know what I mean? Like, why is that a thing?
I don't know. It's on the bullet point here though.
well, that can be something that we're wondering. We can ask her.
Yeah.
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 Is
it
that our
called-
many
is it called
question?
Mercy housing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would
Okay,
be a good
Many
one.
question at 5 minutes and 45 seconds.
Okay.
Write that down.
What's our question?
Our question is, how would you word it?
Why
is
does there
con-
need to be an ELL specialist?
or like what is considered an ELL
Yeah, what is
specialist of a
considered
Yeah. What is
community?
considered an ELL specialist and what part do they play in our
Yeah.
like?
In our project, like how
Yeah.
much communication, yeah, and how are we supposed to, yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
And how
I
are we
feel like-
supposed to know any more than that? How are we
Yeah.
supposed to?
3 ready questions.
I wonder how many times we said yeah throughout this.
A lot.
Enough. Okay, so when I looked up the Mercy housing, Sterling Meadows, it has like neighborhood information. It's got like, it says 51 units of multifamily affordable housing, like the 21 2-bedroom, 23 bedroom. It's 2002,
Like a
and it's
housing
funded by
area.
the State of Washington Housing Trust Fund.
That's all
Homestead
good
Capital.
information.
There's also the senior
It
area.
has ESL
as well.
classes. It says amenities and services, computer training lab, childcare, outdoor play space, ESL classes, after school program, homework club, and then citizenship
This
classes.
looks like a great community.
That's so cute.
This community is fantastic, and I love all the people there.
And it serves 50 agricultural workers and their families who earn 45% or less of the area median income. 10 units are set aside for persons with disabilities and 10 are set aside for large families. Oh my
There's
gosh.
some pretty large.
So it's called Sterling Meadows, but if you look it up, if you search Sterling Meadows, you're going to get a farm. That's what I did. So search Mercy Housing, Sterling Meadows. Okay.
So is it a community for like migrant farming
Yeah.
families?
So like they're all farm working families that are really low income, and they're pretty much all immigrants.
Okay.
I think a good place to start would be to get in touch with your contact and then set up a time that we can all go
Can we get
to
a
Sterling
tour?
Meadows and meet her.
Her
Yeah.
email should be on there.
Yeah,
But
there's
I don't know
phone
her
number.
in specific. I only know Papa, who's Francisco.
We could still like talk to her.
Same
and be
guy.
like, hey, what are you gonna do?
Yeah, we can still email her, but from a different standpoint, not like
Yeah.
you know her, but like we're from this class,
Yeah.
we want to go.
I wonder
yeah.
if we could get like a tour of the actual neighborhood itself, and then like maybe interview people. Like, is there anyone that's lived there? a while
So we
that you
should
can talk
email
with?
the people on the actual website, not the homework club.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do I get back? Okay. I have a phone number, so we could always call them.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna write.
Okay,
this.
so we're supposed to use either pages, collaborations, or conferences, which are all available on Canvas. And we're supposed to use that to collaborate with our group and discuss like a list of resources, school and community information, and other like guidelines on the assignment. We're supposed to like make a page, and that way we can like share information on it.
Isn't that
We
just
have our
it?
own group discussion page already.
Yeah, we have.
Yeah, but
We're group.
but do we need to have it seen on Canvas so that she can see it?
She can see it. That's how she sees all of her posts.
No,
No,
on
group.
GroupMe.
Group me.
Oh wait, we don't need group. Collaborate with your group. Use pages. Yeah, we use pages.
Do we use
No,
pages?
okay, but the conferences, like you could be doing the conferences instead of doing this. This is our actual meetup.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yes, sorry.
Do we want to contact the president?
Probably not. There's not that specific location. It's
Just find someone who's in charge of communications.
Okay.
Oh, so this is on to the next thing.
Yeah, now we're starting
The
the
student profiling was fun. Their stories were so interesting.
No, I
They
love
were
reading
really
their stories.
interesting.
Okay, so do you want to move on to the next thing we're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. F and F chapter 1, guys. Case studies.
So A.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or
Should we
number
just?
one.
No, we shouldn't. It says share summary, connections, and questions raised about the students you profiled. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So A.
Who is A?
Me.
Awesome. What did
Okay.
you post about?
I posted about Eugenia and Farah. And so Eugenia, I'm just going to give a short little thing. Eugenia is about 5. She was born in the U.S. and she goes to a bilingual kindergarten class. And so her
Super
parents,
cool.
yeah, it's so cool. And like they don't speak any English, her parents, but her teacher is Puerto Rican, and she's talking about how important it is to have a strong native language, and that'll help you build your English. And so like the parents were really concerned because Eugenia's older brother already has dropped out of school because it was just too much. And so in 5th grade, or in first kindergarten, I was saying 5 years old in kindergarten, she's loving it, she's having so much fun, and she feels really supported and excited to go to the next classes.
And where's she from?
She's, I think, California, yeah. I mean, she was born here. She was born in a neighbor's house because the parents were undocumented and were too afraid to go to the hospital.
Right.
Right?
Wow.
And they're now, like, documented. Now they're all good. But at
Okay,
the
can I
beginning, they were
just make a
scared.
comment? Can you imagine how much that happens on a daily basis
Yeah.
in our
Yeah.
country?
Oh my gosh, I
That's
hadn't even
unbelievable
thought about it.
and
when I was
so
reading it.
unsafe for children
Yeah.
to be born at home.
And unsafe for the mother. Like
Right.
we get a lot of
They
bad
were just
things
so
happen
scared.
to her down
Okay,
there.
really quick, even though this has more to do with some other people's stories, but it's in my head now, so I'm gonna say it. So, she goes to a bilingual school,
Bilingual kindergarten.
and I know like a lot of these stories were talking about how important it is to help build up their first language because that'll help them build
Mhm.
off of it. And I feel like that can easily be done with Spanish because we have a lot of people who learn Spanish and like ELLs or mainly speak Spanish. But then there's also the people from different countries and like, that don't. And there was a few kids within this that I read your guys' that spoke a different language.
Yeah.
And I feel like there aren't as much resources to get specialists for that because I mean
Like
a lot.
Ukrainian and Russian
Yeah,
and
like
Arabic.
where are you gonna get
Sometimes I
those?
think that the school systems put too much emphasis into making the bilingual programs for Spanish speakers
Oh my gosh.
super, super, super detailed and like well put together, and then some of the other languages or kids that speak other languages don't get quite as much focus as they need to.
But how would we? Like you'd have to find people that.
Yeah.
Or we'd have
The
to
schools have
change
that,
the
yeah.
approach of it.
So like, sorry, I'm
Well, if we
jumping
want
back
to build
in.
their first language.
Mhm.
We'd have to find people that know their first language.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we don't often like have people that speak those languages in our schools.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
usually just have Spanish speakers.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So that's what I was confused of because it kept saying like build their first language, but like how would we do that?
Right, yeah. Especially if you don't have first-hand experience or like access to books that do that.
Or if you have like 5 students that are ELLs in your class that all speak different languages, like how can you possibly?
Exactly.
Incorporate
and
all of
especially
it.
in just like a normal public school system. Like, yeah, we want to help them, but what are we supposed to be
Right.
doing?
Should this be one of our money questions?
Sure.
I think so.
1253.
Because it's like, I don't know, it's really challenging to try and figure out where or how to incorporate the students' like native languages into our teaching styles if there's like a lot of different native languages and we don't know them.
Yeah.
Right.
So
So
I can't learn every single language.
No,
So
that's not work.
is the question, how do we incorporate all,
Support for all language learners.
not just Spanish
Yeah.
speakers?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Do we want to also
We have to
expand on
write
that?
that down though, because we have to type it up after.
Do we want to also expand on that though and say maybe what are some other ways that we could, I don't know, incorporate the culture without necessarily focusing so much on the language? Because culture is a little bit easier to incorporate than language because language you have to like learn rules.
But the point, I thought that the whole point of that was that they'll learn English better if at first they have a strong build on their first language.
Yeah, I guess that's right.
Okay, sorry, I'm jumping back in now.
Yeah.
Because this is all connected with the next girl I learned. So I was like, oh, this is everything. So Farah, she was from Iraq,
Mm-hmm.
and she had to move here because of the war in 4th grade. And so she was completely at grade level academically. She came from upper class Iraq family and Iraq school. Like, she's on top of everything. She's very intelligent. And she came here, and she had a strong sense of her own language, but struggled so much with English. Even though she took private lessons, she studied at night, her parents knew English. She couldn't get the hang of it and couldn't connect as well. And her teacher didn't know how to help her, so she sent her to a pull-out class. And it said that she felt like she was learning more Spanish than English in her pull-out class. and she was only learning like Spanish. She wasn't learning enough English because all the ELL students are Spanish
And
speakers.
so they were speaking
Oh,
Spanish.
So they're speaking Spanish.
Oh,
They weren't helping her learn English in her pull-up
so
class.
interesting.
And she studied
That's
at
so
night and
sad.
tried to do all this, and her parents were stressed about other things, so it made her stressed at home. She took her worries to school.
My
There's a big
gosh.
section on how she had nightmares about the war and because she was falling
Oh.
behind. And then the tests were coming up, and although she was at grade level academically, because of the language barrier, she kept falling behind.
Oh my
And it was
goodness.
so
And she was
sad.
learning more Spanish than
And
English. in
her
pull-out
brother, who was
classes.
in kindergarten, is having the same thing that Eugenia was doing. He was making friends, he was learning English and speaking his own language, and she was only feeling comfortable talking to other girls who looked like her and wore hijabs, and also who spoke Arabic, because she was already old enough, and she's feeling all that stress, and it was so hard to read.
And
I
then we
hate-
expect of them to learn the curriculum
Yeah.
that we're teaching them.
And I
Yeah.
hate how a lot of these stories ended with like, this child was not successful.
I
and I was like,
know.
oh,
I know.
Why are you telling us
Yeah.
this story?
Yeah, this one ended with, we'll see, and I was like, what?
We'll see.
How is she?
Well, I just wonder, like, how important is the academic curriculum? I mean, like, obviously academic curriculum is super important, but, like, compared to trying to learn the language that the academic curriculum is taught in, like, we always try and teach the kids everything at once, and I wonder if it might be, like, semi-more effective to, like, focus on just the language that they need to learn to be taught in our education
and then maybe
system.
they'll be a little bit behind in curriculum, but in the long run, it'll help them out.
That's what my big question is,
Yeah.
like, would it be more beneficial for that?
Is that another money
I think that's
question?
money.
We're gonna have more than 3 months.
That's okay.
That's okay.
Overachievers.
16,
There has to be a good balance between that, too, because, like, ASL community,
So-
sorry, back when they, like, mainstream deaf people, they spent all day just learning how to say the word O, you know? And so they never worked on curriculum, so there has to be, like, a balance.
There definitely has to be a
So
balance.
Yeah.
I just want to get our money question. in
Oh,
really
sorry.
quick, sorry. So our money question is
Where's the balance
maybe
between...
we should just, or should we as teachers just focus on teaching students
English at first.
English first,
And then eventually
go
lead
into
into more
curriculum?
academic. Like, I don't think we should completely abandon academic curriculum, but, like, when they mainstream kids that don't speak any English into all English-speaking classrooms, I don't think it does anything for them at all because they can't understand anything that's being said.
And a lot of the English they are learning could be like curriculum-based language
Right.
and
Yeah.
like and school-based language, like when you need to know math words to understand math. So if you know the words, you can understand the math better.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that, like, the reason they don't want to put students in, like, pull-out classrooms or ELL classes specifically instead of just the mainstream general education classrooms is because they don't want to make them
Stand
feel
out.
special or, like, they don't want to make them, like,
So
pull
much
them.
special, but like
Yeah,
Yeah.
you get what I'm saying. But, like, I understand that, but at the same time, like, I think it'd be more beneficial for most kids, like, if they come in and they don't speak any English, like, it'd be more beneficial for them to learn a whole bunch of English, like, some intensive English courses first.
Yeah.
That's like what they do in high school and with older kids, just not with the little tiny kids,
Mm-hmm.
which is
Off
interesting.
the lid.
I like that you just
Was
reached
that
over and
the-
started playing with them.
it was a one of the little things.
Do we want to go to
Look like it.
How
Yeah,
was
we
number
can go
B?
to B.
Letter B.
Um,
Happy Friday.
So for some reason I didn't realize that Moni and Osman were two different people. So when I first read this, I just read Moni's,
Oh,
and then I was like, wait, I think there's two people. So then I went, okay, sorry, side note. So Moni arrived, I hope I'm saying her name right, but she arrived from Thailand and she's in kindergarten. And she just got, like, she came here from Thailand, got right into school, like, it wasn't a big deal. And then her teacher noted that she's a really talented artist, like, way more talented than her peers. But she, like, wasn't doing so well in, like, other academic fields. She speaks Khmer,
Khmer.
Khmer.
Yeah.
And
Where do we
only
find people that speak bad?
yeah, only a few other people in her classroom speak that. Her teacher, after the kindergarten year, her teacher placed her in pre-first, which is a class for people who aren't quite ready for first grade. I was actually in pre-first when I was in school.
I never even heard of pre-first.
Because they did away with it a few years ago.
Oh,
They
okay.
like thought it might be a good idea, and then they just did away with it. But I have a summer birthday, and summer birthdays are always really weird with the school system. So I either went into kindergarten when I was 5 or I went in when I was 6.
And they put you in at 5?
And my parents put me in at 5 because they did that with my brother and it worked fine. And then I went in and, like, they realized maybe we should have put her in at 6. And so then I just went to pre-first after that, and it was just like a stepping stone to first grade.
That's what happened to me too.
Oh, really? You were in pre-first? Yeah. And then, so anyway, so this is what happened with Moni. It's still going. This is what happened with Moni. She got in pre-first, and then she ended up having to transfer schools for some reason. Didn't really say. And then her teacher, or her old kindergarten teacher, was still curious about her, so during her time off, she went to this new school
So cool.
and did a case study on her and realized that in this, like, new, smaller setting, Moni was, like, absolutely thriving in all of her academic classes. So
I think that teachers like that are so amazing. Like,
Yeah.
she's taking her vacation
I
time
know.
to go, like, check up on a student that she had.
For real.
Yeah.
That's, like, a good teacher. That
Yeah.
should
Yeah.
be an education. And then Osman is a boy, and he was from, Somalia. He was from Somalia. He left Somalia when he was 5 and came to the United States, but he didn't enter school again until he was 12 because he was in a refugee camp for
Wow.
those years. And so maybe he wasn't in the U.S. then, but he left Somalia when he was 5. And then this is his first time in formal education, having a formal education experience at 12 years old. He says that moving to a big city is super, super overwhelming, especially coming from Somalia, because there's, like, huge buildings everywhere, and he doesn't, there's so many people here, and it's just really, like, confusing for him. He's also having a really hard time, or his family's also having a really hard time adjusting to the colder climate here. I think it said they were in New York. So they're having a hard time adjusting to the cold climate because they have to, like, change the way that they dress, they have to change the way that they cook, like, they have to change a bunch of things about that. So they're worrying about that at home, and then when he goes to school, he's worrying about school because he's way far behind in academics and in, like, speaking English. And so it's just really hard to catch up because no matter where he's at, he's worrying about something. I think, yeah, and it also noted that he was learning English at the same time that he was learning this content information that all of his peers are learning, but he's, like, super far behind.
Yeah,
so
so he's not picking
he
up on
doesn't
anything
get
that
it
he's
yet.
learning.
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying.
Okay, C. On here. So I'm not sure how to say the. We good?
Yeah.
How to say the name of this kid? So, just in case I mess it up, I think it's Tou, T-O-U.
Or Tao.
Tao. Yeah. He's a Hmong junior high school student. So he lived in the U.S. since he was 7 months old. So he's pretty good with English, but his parents don't know any English. And he has 2 older brothers who came, and they didn't know any English, and they are already, like, moved out and married. And his, like, one of his older brothers had a really hard time with school and had gang relations. And then his other older brother had also had a really bad time in school, but they didn't talk about him much. And his mom and dad got divorced, which in the Hmong culture, I studied their culture for my religion class, but they are really into, like, having families. Like, they get married really, really young, and sometimes they don't know each other until they're married, and then they
Like
really
an arranged
hold,
marriage.
kind of, yeah, and then they stay together for a really, really long time, and it's really frowned upon to, like, get separated. And so he has a lot of home issues. Oh, and his sister left with his mom, so he doesn't really have.
And he's with his dad?
And he's with his dad, and his 2 older brothers moved out already. And so his teacher, Kathy,
says that he doesn't test very well. He tests below the 15th percentile, but he knows English really well. And so her assumption is that because of the hostile environment in the school, there are other Hmong kids, but there are a lot of racial slurs thrown at him, and he's kind of a short, stocky kid, so they talk bad about him about that too. And then his dad's having a hard time finding a job, so socioeconomically he's not doing very well either, and that's really stressful. And so he was having a really hard time in school because of the hostile environment, so the teacher talked to the dad, and the dad just really wanted him to succeed. Like, he was so into his son's success, but didn't have any way to help him. Like, he didn't know the curriculum, he didn't know English, but he cared so much. That's what was heartbreaking. So the teacher and the father, got him through 7th grade, but 8th grade he, didn't pass. He got into gangs, and then he went to a continuation school. I'm not entirely sure what a continuation school is.
Is it like those ones for kids that get, kicked out?
Is it like an alternative
I think
school?
Maybe it's like an alternative
Okay.
school, yeah.
So it helps you get your graduate.
Yeah, and they didn't talk about it past that.
Yeah.
So
I read, I don't even remember if it was one of these articles, I just read at some point that a lot of kids that go through that kind of thing, because they feel so not part of their community at school and stuff, that's why they get into gangs, just be part of
some sort of.
be part of something.
and his older brother did it too, so that's kind of if my older brother did it, I'm gonna do it too.
Yeah.
Kind of, that's his role model.
And I think that's what's interesting, because it can be there's some kids that I feel will look at that and be like, oh, this is what happened to my older brother, I'm not gonna follow in those footsteps, because I don't want to end up like that. And
But if he had connections already, maybe he
That's
knew
true,
the
yeah.
kids, and the people in the gangs had younger brothers that were maybe
Right.
you never know
Also,
how it
yeah.
happens. Yeah.
So is Hmong a language?
Hmong is a culture, and they have a religion.
Where are they from?
And it's also, I don't remember what it's called. They're from small farming villages in somewhere in Asia. I'm not sure where. It's a big continent, I know, or country, I know. And they have a lot of Hmong students and families in California. I'm not entirely sure why, but that's kind of where
Maybe farming.
yeah, and so the Hmong people, they got raided during some sort of war. I can't remember. It's been 2 years. And then so a lot of them had to move out and go into refugee camps, and then a lot of them ended up moving from the refugee camps to America, to California especially. And their religion is based off of shamans. I don't know if you ever studied shamans. And just the saving of the soul.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah.
Very
So it's
interesting.
also, there's a Hmong language and a culture and a religion.
Okay.
D?
Oh, I didn't do my second one.
Oh.
Tao was just so interesting. Okay, so the second one I had was Salvador, who was in 3rd grade. And he had a hard time learning to read and write in Spanish, which was his native language, as well as in English. And he had a really hard time just getting in touch with his teachers, communicating with them and bonding with them. And so he was always really outlandish. And so he would often refuse to read and write in either language. And he moved into a bilingual classroom. Where his teacher worked with him on both of them. And then he got this really nice teacher who would play soccer with him, and that was his favorite sport. And so he bonded with the teacher. And then through positive reinforcement, as well as the teacher who bonded with him was able to talk to him about, okay, well, when you scream and run out of the classroom, this is how the other students feel, and this is why you are hindering their learning experience. And he was really able to hit home with Salvador, and that, I forget how it ends. Oh yeah, his teachers were able to help him advance in his reading and his writing by doing the things I just listed.
Good. Yeah, so it's a success
So they had to
story.
It is a
build-
success story.
And they had to build on his first language for that to help him.
Yeah, Lee didn't even really know how to read and write in his first language or in English, so he was learning
Yeah.
both of them at the same time.
Sounds hard.
It's the greatness of bilingual classrooms, though.
Yeah.
Okay, so Sharma is the only person I was told to read about. But she is a soft-spoken Punjabi, and that's from India, I think. I don't really know where. 5th grader, and she lives in a rural farming community. And what I thought was interesting about her is that her language, her English competency level was categorized as like proficient in English, but there were still a whole bunch of other things that she was working with, even though she could like understand English and speak conversational English and even keep up with academic content areas to some extent with like, it says that she sought out resources to help her make sense of some of the more academic content, but like apparently she got most of it, and I think it's really interesting that she like still qualifies as one of the characters that get, or one of the case studies in this book, because like on a first glance compared to some of the other students, you might look at her and say, oh, she speaks English now, she's like done with it, but really she's the type of kids that fall behind again and again once they're older. But yeah, she had lived like a comfortable middle class life in India, but her parents wanted a better education for her and her sisters, and so they moved to the U.S. and then they had to move back and forth between India and the U.S. a bunch. So she's what's called a Vivan family, which Vivan is Spanish for go or move or life or something. I don't remember. Yeah, but that doesn't make any sense. Spanish is my minor, I should know, but you know. But it just means that it's like a transnational family, so they like have moved back and forth between the countries, which would be completely distracting and disturbing to education. But her parents like let her wear like Western clothing for school, and she got to like participate in like American cultural activities and stuff. But on the weekends, she still had to attend the like Sikh is that Sikh Sikh temple, and still had to participate in the like traditional Punjabi culture and traditions. And so it was a weird like culture balance. She was trying to get it all, but she said that she was likely to succeed. That's what the book said.
I had a question for you actually about that I wrote on the discussion, so I'm going to open up to everyone. But I was wondering what you all think about how her parents had her meld into Western culture. Like, do you think it's easier if the student is thrown into the culture, or if they keep their own cultural identity?
Well, when I was looking at it, it didn't seem like, I didn't think of it so much as like her parents told her to act like Western. I thought of it.
Way.
Oh yeah. Like,
They just allowed her to.
Yeah.
yeah, because I mean, she probably didn't want to stand out too much in the schools and stuff. And I know that, I mean, that's like a really big thing for kids. Like I even had a friend who was from Ireland, and like you don't look, they just have a little bit of an accent, right? And her younger siblings were working really hard to get rid of their accent so that they would fit in with the rest of the kids. Even though like up in high school, like everyone thought she was really cool because she had an accent, but all the little kids are like, no, I'm gonna get rid of them. Like we want to have an American accent. So I just feel like it's just easier for them to like try to fit in, which is sad because they should be like
That's heartbreaking.
comfortable and
Yeah.
like who they are.
I think currently at this point, though, like in time, I think it would still definitely be easier to just try and like assimilate into American culture for the student at least.
But her parents are still helping her like build who she was like culturally at home, and I remember the book talking about that as being one of the like.
It's like Ogbu's theory.
Yeah, one of those was like, oh, they switch back and forth.
Yeah.
Like, at school, they're
It was the immigrant minorities instead of
Yeah.
the involuntary.
Yeah.
But I had like in Kent, which is where I grew up, it's the most diverse like part of Washington, and like I had so many friends that were mostly from India because I guess Kent's a big place, and like what is it? My friends Sarah and Pranitha were so very like Western, like involved at school and really like into all that stuff. You wouldn't even like consider that they were different in any way. And then you'd go home and visit, and it's kind of like they'd have to wear like traditional outfits and cook traditional meals. And so it was like, then I don't know, they loved it.
It's like two worlds, but they get to live in both of them.
They
kind
get
of.
to
like
live
in
in both.
Montana.
That kind of almost like breaks my heart though, because it's like, are they like
Conforming?
Are they assimilating to Western culture when they're at school so they're not bullied?
I think.
Or are they doing it so that, or because they want to?
I think because at least
it's
for my
the
friends at least, and I don't know if Kent's just really thing, but they just wanted to, at home and school they wanted to be certain ways, and then at home they were okay with how it was.
When did they start? Were they young or was it when they were older?
I think, when they started coming to school? I met her in middle school, so she had to have been around middle school age, if not younger, when she came.
I think it's like the younger.
Well, and also think back to middle school, like everybody like
Awkward.
assimilated to each other. Like
Mhm.
everybody wore the same exact clothes and talked the
Juicy.
same way, and
Yeah.
like think back to middle school. If you didn't have a Razor cell phone, you were like
Yeah.
uncool.
I was on
Or if you
the
didn't wear
side.
Uggs and the juicy like
Right.
jumpsuit with
Yeah.
the Lulus,
Or
yeah.
like
All black.
Hollister,
Oh my God.
Abercrombie, like that was like an
All black and spiked, so I was
American
a weirdo.
cultural
But that's the thing, even
bullying thing.
But even those people were assimilating too, like not just people of different cultures. Like
Yeah.
everyone was trying to be like
Everyone was assimilating to something.
So maybe it's
Yeah.
just natural because they wanted to then, instead of just that they were afraid of being bullied.
It's like a fit-in.
I
I
guess
think
all
it's a
kids are
natural
afraid of
thing
being
for
bullied.
kids to want to be the same as everyone
Yeah.
else because they don't want to stand out. They're still trying to find out who they are. So in the meantime, they're just gonna not stand out and be like everyone else.
I read this book I'm in ELL 431. Have you guys taken that yet?
This is what
This
we're
is,
in.
sorry, LED 405. These classes are so similar. LED 405. Have you guys taken
No.
that yet?
Yeah.
I was signed up and dropped out.
Not yet. Okay, so it's really, really cool. It's the like multicultural materials for diverse learners. And so I just read this book for this last week, and it's a children's book, and it's called Marisol McDonald Doesn't Match. And it's this little girl who's like elementary school age, and she's Peruvian and Scottish, like mixed. And she just like wears these goofy outfits, like polka dot pants and a like hot pink shirt. Like she just like is super goofy and stuff, and like is just her own person. And her like she goes to school and everyone's like, Marisol McDonald, you don't match, like makes fun of her and stuff. And so one day she wakes up and she decides, okay, today I'm gonna match because everybody wants me to and like teases me about it. So she wakes up and she wears like all the same clothes that look all like the same color. And so she's like matching, and she goes to school and she eats like a boring PB&J sandwich like everybody else. She like plays the games with everybody else that she doesn't get to be creative enough for or whatever. And so she like assimilates to everybody else in her class, and her teacher sends her home with a note that day and says like, I love how different you are, basically. Like, I don't want you to be like everybody else. Like, I wish you were, like, you would go back to the Marisol McDonald that I love or whatever. And so sends her home with that note, and she's like, yeah, you're right. Like, I'm going to be myself. And so then she just goes on being herself. And I was talking to my group this morning about if teachers reached out to students before we got to that middle school assimilation phase, then I wonder what I would have been like now if someone would have been like, don't assimilate to all of your friends. Because, like, I mean, all of us can relate. We were freaking weird when we were little.
Yeah.
And I wish that somebody would have encouraged that so that now I could still be weird. And
That's kind of like, that just reminded me, I feel like that's becoming slightly a bigger thing, at least for my practicum, wow, I can't talk. My practicum that I went to at Carl Kosher, there, in the classroom, it was a really big thing to, like, be yourself, and, we, like, all our books that we read. What grade? Second grade. Okay.
Wait, were you with Miss Conlon?
Yeah. We
I
talked
love
about
her.
this already.
Oh, I don't remember anything.
And
I know that
she-
today's 22.
And, like, she was really adamant about us reading our, like, read-alouds about being, like, yourself and not trying to be, like, the same as everyone else, and, like, how you can do whatever you want, well, not, like, do whatever you want, but, you know, like, be who you want.
right.
So that was, like, a really important thing that she talked about in her classroom a lot, which I found was really interesting because I didn't remember ever, like, being told that in elementary school.
Yeah.
And then, also, there was something else I was going to say, but now I forget what it was.
In Miss Conlon's class, when I was practicum there,
Yeah.
we read Morris Micklewhite and the Tangerine Dress, and it's all about a little boy that loves to wear dresses.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like so cool because when we were reading it, the girl that was presenting the lesson was really afraid that it wasn't going to be like, you know, the kids weren't really going to get it or they weren't going to be receptive. And in the middle, she was like, why are they making fun of him? And someone's like, because he's wearing a dress. And we talked about, like, why. And they were like, all of them were like, if he wants to wear a dress, he can wear a dress. It doesn't matter. And it was cool that in second grade, that was already something they could understand because it was presented.
That's
Well,
like the
if you-
story.
Okay, sorry. I work in the 3-year-olds classroom all the time though. Like I work in all the ages, but like 3-year-olds, they have so much personality and they're so willing to be whoever they are and do whatever they want and like there's not a thought in the world. But somehow by the time they get to 3rd grade, that's like
We
one
should
of
all
the
be
top
3.
things on their mind. But yeah, if we were all 3-year-olds, the world would be such a fantastic place. Actually, no, it'd be a disaster.
We couldn't drive, but we'd be cute.
But yeah, from my read aloud from Miss Collins, I read like a story about like this princess who was like, her parents were like, you're not being prim and proper, like why aren't you being a good princess? And then she's like, because I like to skateboard and do karate and stuff like that. And then she like goes to like this princess camp to act like a princess, and then they're all like, you're not doing it right. And she's like, I want to skateboard. And like basically at the end she saves the day. She saves him from a dragon because it's a kid's book. But then all the kids are like, we want to know how to skateboard and karate chop too.
That's cute.
But what you were saying earlier kind of reminded me of like my niece, for instance. Like she is a weird kid. She is really weird. But she's in 6th grade now, so I'm like keep getting more nervous that she's gonna start like acting like everyone else.
Yeah.
But her parent, or my brother, her dad, is very adamant about her like being herself.
Oh.
So she's still really weird, and I think it's great.
That's so awesome.
And people like her. So.
Yeah.
It's like at that younger age, if we like
Encouraged it from a
Encourage
young
them.
age.
Yeah.
Because he never, like, she just has a really big imagination. You know, like, a lot of times when kids are growing up, people are like, that's not realistic. Like, don't,
Right.
that's dumb. No one, like, he never let anyone tell her that. And, like, he would never do that. So she's just super, like, I can do whatever I want and anything can exist and everything.
That's
great.
And she's in 6th grade now, so.
That's awesome. I just think that if we, like, encouraged more of, like, individuality and, like, students to, like, incorporate their culture while they're in school, I just think it would be more beneficial.
And then that would be, like, preparing them for later in life for more opportunities because people get so stuck in, like, this is, like, what I should do. This is how much money I should make. This is, like, how I should, I don't know, go through life. And everyone's the same.
They get this idea that they have to have this American dream, and then they get to adulthood and they're like, what if I don't want the American dream? What if I want a different dream? And then it's confusing, you know? So if that was, like, celebrated beforehand, I think it would be easier.
Yeah.
I agree. Okay, should we do my people?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So slowly.
Mine was a one story, but with 3 siblings. So there's these 3 siblings: Jose, Luis. This one person. I don't know how to pronounce it. It's like Guillermo, and then Patricia. Okay. And so they're like all teenagers. I think Patricia's like 13, and then Jose is older. He's probably like 16, 17. And they were from El Salvador, and their aunt had them move in with her in California, I think, or like into the United States, because they saw their dad assassinated in El Salvador, and their stepmom, who was like, it was their dad and stepmom, she was like, I don't want to be associated with you guys because I'm worried for me and my child, so she didn't let them live with her, and so they had nowhere to go, so their aunt like brought them to the United States. And in El Salvador, they're from a pretty prominent family, so they attended private schools, and they traveled throughout the United States and Europe. Like, they knew the grammar of English, but they weren't very good at communicating or understanding it.
Yeah.
And so they all took, like, they all followed kind of different paths. Not different paths, but they handled it differently. So, like, the oldest sibling, he just worked really hard all the time in school to, like, understand English, understand, like, everything happening. All he ever did was study. Like, he got made fun of for being boring because, like, all he ever did was, like, study all the time so that he could do well in school. Especially because, I remember there's a part in here. So the 3 of them, like, their aunt brought them there, but she kind of, like, got them an apartment and then kind of, like, let them take care of themselves. So it's, like, these 3 teenage kids living in this apartment, like, on their own, kind of, like, sustaining themselves. Like, she was kind of there, but she was really busy.
So they pretty much took care of themselves. So he felt like he needed to be like in charge of them and take care of them, and he kind of felt like guilty for everything that had happened to them because he was the oldest, so he needed to take care of them. So that's why he worked really hard, and he ended up graduating high school with a President's Award in like good grades and stuff. So
Nice.
he worked really hard. Then Guillermo, he took like it a little differently. Like he did well in school, like a B- average, but he made a lot of friends. Like he just made friends with everyone. He just wanted to know everyone. He wanted to be a part of every club. He wanted to like do every extracurricular activity. So he just met a lot of people, and he did well in school. And then Patricia was a little more shy. She picked up English the fastest, which might be because she was the youngest, and she spent most of her time with the people that did this case study were from her church community. So she spent a lot of time with their family, like learning about Western culture and like learning just like about the United States. And she spent a lot of time with like friends from that community. And then all of them graduated high school with good grades, and then all of them went and graduated from the University of Arizona, and they all kind of like got careers and things they were passionate about. And when they originally moved to the United States, they were planning on all going back, like taking the careers that they had gotten and the knowledge that they had gotten in the United States and going back to El Salvador to like live there and bring that there. But they ended up calling the United States their home, and they'll visit their family and friends in El Salvador every now and again, but they pretty much plan to stay in the United States, which I thought was interesting because, you know, people go into thinking that they're not going to want to stay here, and they could bring all the stuff back, but they stay here instead. I don't know why they did that.
Yeah, because, okay, sorry, like in Ogbu's theory or whatever, it talks about the immigrant minorities versus the involuntary minorities, and the immigrant minorities, like, have the, okay, here, I have it down, like, have the strong connections to the primary cultural identities and traditions, and often remain motivated to succeed and learn without letting differences overcome them. And it said a huge thing is that they're, like, the idea is almost always to take what you learn and go back to the home country. Yeah, so that was a big thing. Yeah, and most of the time they don't, is what it was saying. But that's the idea, is that we'll go home.
Interesting.
But instead, their home changed.
The video anymore.
Yeah, the home changes.
Oh, I think she knows I'm here. I'm here still. That's really interesting. My uncle is from Georgia. He married my aunt. He just recently got a divorce. And he remarried recently, too. So, but his wife is in Georgia, the country. I don't know if that's,
okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
I didn't get
It's
that.
right by Russia. A lot of people think
so
I'm
I was
talking about
definitely
this
thinking,
state.
I was like,
I was
okay,
like,
that's
okay.
so important about Georgia.
No, but his intention before he met my aunt was to come to the United States, get a good job, get some money, like learn skills, and then go back to Georgia, meet a wife, settle down, have kids there, and like have all this knowledge about the business world in America or something. Anyway, his plan has totally changed. He now remarried, and she lives in Georgia, but he still lives in the United States. And
It's a transnational family.
right, and she's eventually gonna come here and live with him, so that he doesn't have to leave his job.
Interesting.
Because he's here now, he has people that he loves and like refers to his family and stuff. But anyway, that made me think of that because people change their minds a lot about like what their plans are for going back and forth.
And the involuntary, I read about that, the involuntary immigrants. I went to Germany last summer, and as you guys are probably aware, like, a lot of people that call the Middle Eastern countries home, like, are refugees now, and they're moving up into Europe, and some are coming over here. But Germany has, like, so many of them that, like, they're faced with, like, racism and, like, seclusion every single day, and, like, their refugee home, or the refugee camps are, like, so packed and, like, crowded and dangerous, and it's mostly families, and, like, young kids, and so you can imagine, like, how many kids are coming into, like, the education system with no knowledge of the language at all. Like, they took in, like, 5 million refugees.
And
or
there,
something
they're
like
expecting
that.
them to learn German and English because in the German school systems they
They
learn
teach
English.
English.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Mhm.
and usually, well, never mind. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, you have to take English or French. You have to choose one.
Oh yeah.
But then, I don't know what I was gonna say.
That's more of like the immigrant minorities though, because they're moving. Like
Well,
I mean, it sounds involuntary because they were refugees, but like involuntary minorities are like people who have already been there for centuries and generations.
Except for that's what they said, but
Yeah,
then
but
when
it
I was
sounds like it like.
But
But
when
when
I
I
was
read the
reading
other
the
part-
textbook, when I was reading the textbook, when it gave it an example of someone who was an involuntary immigrant, one of the kids, I read his story, and the story, he moved to the United States. Like, his family hadn't been there for centuries. Like, other people of his culture hadn't, but he hadn't.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. I
So
wonder
I
if
was
they like
confused.
overlap. Maybe that's a mighty question. Is like, where's the line?
I bet they do overlap. That's a
Because I don't
good
think that
question.
there's one or the other.
Because they mentioned
Yeah.
refugees in there too.
Yeah, but like when I was reading it, like, and this was just because it was part of my thing. It was like groups include African Americans, Mexican Americans, refugees from Southeast Asia given asylum back when we were doing the
Yeah, these are past,
Pearl
but
Harbor, and then Native Americans. So it said people that have been like in here forever, and I was like,
I think
okay,
it's so
it means
sad
that they're
American.
already kind of isolated within our country. But
So,
like
But
refugees,
they weren't
have no
ever.
choice.
They never.
Yeah, but
Native
then
Americans never migrated.
No, they were here. They're
So they're
involuntary
involuntary.
minorities because while they
Oh,
were
right,
here,
minority.
they're involuntarily like,
except for that,
face
it
racism.
says that Tao is an involuntary minority.
So it's so confusing.
Because he was a refugee. That was my point. That's why I thought that this
Yeah.
counted too. Because
So-
he was a refugee.
Are all refugees considered involuntary
I mean,
minorities?
it
then?
wasn't voluntary.
It would make the most sense because they literally had to move there to save their
Yeah.
life, and they don't want to be there. A lot of
Even
them
though it
are
doesn't
home.
follow any of the other stuff.
Yeah.
in the
I
My
know.
question.
So our question is:
Are
Are
refugees
refugees
involuntary
minorities?
Yeah.
Okay.
No matter what.
Like no matter what, or is it
Do you
like?
look at the camera when you?
Well, I'm looking at what time.
Oh, okay. I was on like your side until I come back.
Hey.
Okay, so we're taking forever. We have like 7 more slides to talk about.
Also,
Do we really have to?
I'm not sure if this will upload over an hour
We
on
might need to pause it and
YouTube,
start a new one.
so we might need to have to start a new one. And-
Okay, or we
She
can cut
said
it.
she wants it bigger than an hour.
Oh,
She has
really?
Okay, well,
Maybe it
I asked her
has
should
that
it be an
one.
hour, and then she said, well, it seems like it could be.
Do you know how to like cut them and put them up on YouTube in different chunks? Okay, the computer lab has like the Audacity program and like Movie Maker, and so like.
I think we just found these.
Your
these
face.
this-
That was
We'll
like-
figure it out.
Seriously, we talked about the first.
Yeah, you guys, there's so much more. Anyways, I
Okay.
was gonna say this next part
Let's
says
skim them all.
we're gonna do this
Well,
faster.
the other thing we read all of it, so
I have a strategy.
Okay.
So define the next one is Freeman chapter 2, and it says to define the term and explain how these help us understand the profiles in chapter 1 or your case study if applicable. And then it goes through to list all the different categories of like newly arrived with adequate schooling, newly arrived with limited schooling, long-term English learning, like all of those categories.
And this
Just before.
was on our discussion, so we can
Yeah.
just take main points.
That's what I was gonna say. Is I don't think we need to actually talk about what each one was. Maybe we can just like categorize the students and which ones go in which categories.
Well, I had Salvador.
Wait, should we go A, B, C, D?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or we could go EDC.
Or we could go to A.
Whoa.
Okay, so sorry. Eugenia was a potential long-term English learner, and Farah was newly arrived with adequate schooling. And it sounded like she was going to be okay, but the negative influences in her life made it difficult. Ciao.
Okay, B.
I hope I'm saying this right. I got newly arrived with adequate schooling. Am I just
For both
describing
of
what
yours?
that is?
Well, okay.
Am I
What we
saying
were
which is
supposed to do
which?
in the question is we were given A, B, C, D, and it
Yeah.
labeled us.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mine
not what
was
she
to talk.
just did.
Mine was to talk about all of them.
Really?
You want
It
to talk
was-
about all of them?
Mine was confusing.
Mine was just potential long-term English learners.
Mine
Mine
was
was
because
just
there's
newly
only
arrived.
4, and so for mine it was like define this with all of the students, and I was like, I only read about 2, so I only labeled my 2 students.
Oh,
But it
okay.
wanted me to look at all of them.
So then I defined what newly arrived with adequate
Yeah.
schooling was.
Okay, cool.
But we
So-
don't need to define it now because we have
Okay.
to write it.
Just
on.
say
Yeah.
what the student was that related to it. Did you not have one of those?
I had Moni and Osmond.
No, that related to your, because it gave you a student in the reading. That
In the
related
first
to
one?
it.
In your
In the first question.
Moni and Osmond.
No, in the question we're on right now. So it had in the, obviously it didn't, or she would know.
I don't think
Because
it
mine had two.
It probably didn't. Mine had one. Maybe it didn't. Maybe there wasn't
Mine
an
had one
example.
unit.
Well, mine was newly arrived with limited schooling, and the one that was in mine was Osmond.
Yeah, here's A. B was newly arrived, C was newly arrived, limited, D was long term. Mine was, in what ways do the above mentioned cases study fit into each of the learner categories?
Okay.
So
And they're like, what?
What
I was
was
like,
yours?
no.
Okay, so Sharma, I actually had long-term English learner, and that's what I would qualify Sharma as, even though she's a little bit young for it, but she's clearly a long-term English learner because she already speaks English, so.
Yeah. And then for mine, I had potential long-term English learners, and this was kind of split into two different categories. So Moni was one of the categories, which is, well, you guys could just read about it in my thing. And then Salvador was the other one in the other category under potential long-term English learners.
Okay, and there's a whole bunch of stuff on theories here, but we're going to skip it because I don't understand what it means and it's not related to us at all. So Rios and Marcus, education as a human right.
This 19-page article.
Yeah, that one.
Are we on number 4 or number 3?
4. Why'd you skip all 3?
It doesn't, it's not on here.
3's not on the
Oglu's theory and how that informs the mine was this. Oglu's theory and how
Mine was
that
Oglu's
informs the
theory.
context
Yeah, no, that's what all of
interaction.
the 3 was, but.
But I didn't understand what the context interaction model was
Oh,
because
just
I
kidding,
tried.
sorry, it's here.
Oh, I
That's it.
explained that.
Like
Yeah.
I understood what it was, but they wanted me to talk about how his theory informs it along with the students, and I was really confused. So I was just like, oh, well, Tao was an involuntary minority, and he had like these were the parts of the context interaction model that affected him mostly. That's what I did. I don't even know if that was what I was supposed to do, but
YOLO.
it was. I feel like there was a typo in what I was supposed to do because it just didn't make sense.
Okay.
Do you want me to explain what the theories were? Or did we all have to do that?
I think we are.
I think that we all read each other's already is the thing.
Yeah, we all read each other's.
We
already.
read each other's discussions.
So
yeah.
so I don't really
So
know
is there
what else
anything
we-
that you really stood out to you about Oglu's theory that you want to discuss?
I think we already wrote down that many question that
Yeah,
like, I
we
had,
talked
which
about this
is
earlier.
Yeah.
about the refugees.
I just didn't.
Perfect.
This part I wasn't as.
Should we move on to the
impactful
Rios
as
and
the other
Marcus
parts.
article?
Sure.
Read the article.
No, should we move on to
Oh,
the
yeah.
Rios and Marcus
Yes,
article?
yes,
You're like, no, we should not.
So
read
we
the
all
article.
had to do that one part.
Yeah, so that-
we don't really
That
need
was
to
just
talk about
summarizing
that.
the entire article, right?
Basically,
Yeah.
So should we just go through and talk about what our A, B, C, D, and E part were?
Sure.
Yeah, I think we should because this is interesting.
A.
A is me, but for some reason I put the letter B next to it.
But you did A, right?
But I did A.
Okay, I was confused about that.
Did
I
you
was
guys
kind
have
of
2
worried.
parts to yours? Because I had 2 parts to mine.
I had 3.
I had 2 parts to mine.
I had 3.
I had 3.
I think
Someone
yes.
else did mine too, so just saying.
Was it me?
Because it was
I'm
a
Did
thinking
you do
video.
the psychocultural rights?
No.
Did someone else do psychocultural
Well, one of them was
I did
double.
sociocultural.
B and
rights.
D were together.
Yeah,
Not
that
on
was
this one.
right.
I'm C too. So
No.
We weren't there together on this one, on the other, before the one.
Okay,
the
so
one before
4
this.
all.
I'll do, sorry. I can see.
Mine was defining each of the 4, those 2 things. Yeah, okay. So
Access to quality education for all and recognition of the values, the culturally
Yeah.
diversity national.
Let me open up my discussion again.
Cultural diversity national. This is not.
I could go first. We can go backwards.
Yeah,
Because I have mine
let's
up.
go backwards.
Sorry, go backwards.
Okay.
My
So I
loading
have
screen.
cultural democratic rights, so under each part. So I have human rights education, and that mostly talked about how like the role of education is to teach about human rights, and then how if you get to know and become acquainted with and feel strongly about human rights, then this will like build people's appreciation for other cultures, because if you have an appreciation for human rights, you're going to have appreciation for other people's cultures because it's their right. Like, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then they want to create an open environment for learning, which would be like a normal thing. It was pretty much just human rights. And then the second part was knowledge of themselves as active agents and history makers. So this was talking about how Education and teaching are creating seeds that will encourage the growth of students to be active change makers. So basically, like, our part as teachers and as the education system is that we're, like, setting the seeds to grow them into people that are going to make a difference in the world and make changes later in life. So it's, like, insane, like, what we should be doing right now to get them ready.
Did you just wave at the camera, Christy?
I wanted to say hi.
I just like glanced over.
And basically, for me, like, that was just really crazy because it's, like, literally what we're doing is, like, preparing people to be impactful people in the world. And that's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I'm next, huh?
Yep.
Yeah.
DD.
Okay. So my 3 things were, the first one was, okay, it was all about socio-cultural rights. I'm going to try to speak slowly enough that people can understand the words that I'm saying. I struggle with that. The first one
Because
was,
you have a busy schedule, you have to talk fast.
I do, I have so many things to say in so little time, it's so hard. It's very challenging. Okay, freedom from prejudice and discrimination. So this was just all about how prejudices are evident in almost everything, and that a huge,
Sorry.
Keep
going.
What?
are you good?
Yeah, I just
What?
Okay.
Keep going.
Okay, so a main goal is that is shared by, like, multicultural education and other human rights organizations is that to obviously combat prejudice and discrimination, because that's not cool. And prejudices work at, like, all different levels, like social, philosophical, psychological, like, all over the place. They aren't just, like, prejudice, blah, blah, blah. It's not, like, plain cut and simple. It's really complicated. You good?
Yeah.
You good?
I'm just getting antsy, so
Okay, good. I know the feeling. And a question that I had was, does cultural and racial prejudice exist even in, like, the very youngest of students? Like, because, like, if, I don't know, I just want to know, like, even little tiny kids come automatically with cultural and racial prejudice already ingrained in their brains, or do they learn it throughout the school system? And what can we do to prevent them from learning cultural and racial prejudice?
I don't think that they are born
I don't
with
think
it.
you're born as
Actually,
a
no,
racist.
I don't think so, but, like,
Sorry, can I answer?
Yes.
Yes. We are born with racism
Yes.
in our brains. There's been
Interesting.
psychological studies. Well, on adults.
Adults
that-
are born?
Sorry. I'm taking back. Sorry.
Okay.
So there's been psychological studies on adults when they, like, say a black person enters the room, they look, like, totally normal, say, like, totally fine. Everyday average Joe black person walks in the room and places in their brain that trigger fear light up.
But not on babies.
Sorry, that's why I took it back. So,
Oh, okay.
So on adults. So I wonder if that same study would happen, if anything were to happen anywhere on the
Because
brain.
I, like, wonder
with
with, like,
children.
a group of kindergartners that haven't been exposed to any sort of prejudice or racial anything, like, would they still have the same reaction?
I do think that we definitely learn it.
Yeah. The only thing I can imagine happening with really young children is just if someone walks in that maybe looks different from, like, their parents and family that they've grown up with,
Mhm.
that's probably going to be like, oh, it's different. But
Right.
that would be anything. Like, I don't know, like, if someone walked in with, like, a hat on that covered their face, like, I feel like that would do the same thing.
Right.
I also definitely feel like in kindergarten you're already exposed.
Yeah, I'm
to
talking, like,
racism.
baby.
Oh, like a little
Yeah.
baby.
Yeah.
Like if you, like, scan their brain and see the same thing lighted
Yeah.
up or lit up. Sorry.
I
Okay.
definitely think kindergartners are already exposed to the difference.
But, like, can we still combat it in kindergarten because they're so young they haven't learned all of it yet?
Yes.
Yeah.
Totally. Their
Well, I
brains
mean,
are
if you're
moldable.
already exposed to it, I would hope that you wouldn't be, but I feel like you definitely are in America.
By the
and
time
already
you're
exposed to it.
Well, and think about, like, when you're little and you ask your parents about race, as a white person, like, typically you're shushed and, like, told, don't talk about that, you know? So
Mhm.
we're,
Because the thing is, little kids notice things. They're going to notice that someone looks different than they do.
Mhm.
Or
And
their
they're not
family
afraid
does.
to say that they notice it.
Exactly.
right.
It's just how the adults respond to them that,
That
shapes
makes
what they're
them
gonna
like,
believe.
oh, that should be like.
Mhm.
Right.
Okay, anyways, my next category was learning about and from others. And this really focused on how it's not just students that are learning from teachers or students of different cultures that are learning from the teacher that has the mainstream culture or grew up in the mainstream culture, but that really it's about the sharing of information between the teachers so that the teacher can learn just as much or more from the students of different backgrounds and, like, cultures, then the students can learn from the teacher, and how important it was that the teachers view it as that instead of just like, oh, I have all this knowledge of American ways of life and I'm going to share them with the students. It was more like the teachers should view it as, oh, these students have all this different backgrounds and knowledge of other ways of life, and I'm going to learn from them too, and how important that was.
And the students learning from each other, right?
Yeah, and the students learn from each other too. That's true also. But I just thought that was really interesting. And then the third one was developing a more universal vision of a reality, which I don't really remember exactly what it was about right now.
I feel like this article also repeated itself a lot.
Yes.
For sure.
I appreciate that you're hiding it below the table.
What?
Her clicky thingy cap.
Do you want to play with my squishy bear? Take the pencil.
I mean, if you guys saw my feet right now, they're like all over the place.
Oh, your feet drew all over.
Alright, letter C.
Oh, like
Okay, I'll go.
What did you think of it?
I felt like your shoe was off and your feet were shoe.
Okay, so I had psychocultural rights, and the first one was the right to see oneself in curriculum, and it talked about basically how our curriculum doesn't show the worldviews of other cultures. It's really ingrained with colonial, like,
What
white
exactly do you
themes,
mean by
white
the
themes.
like, I mean, I know what you mean by curriculum, but I'm
Like
having
our
trouble understanding.
textbooks,
Like the
and
word problems
yeah.
and like the pictures in the book and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
basically all of our writings. Like, I'm learning about this also in my African American cultural studies class, and it talks about like the language that they use in the school system is very centered towards like the original colonialist thought, which is really interesting. Like, even though it, like, not outwardly,
Like
it's
standard
very
English?
like no, like the word choice that we use in our textbooks and like the pictures that we use and like how we don't teach like that where the African American slaves came from. We just start at when they came to America.
Oh.
Yeah.
We just
Say
talk
that
about
way.
where we dominated them and how we brought them with us
But
to
not-
We don't
America.
talk about like Native American history
We-
before we came.
Yeah. we
That
don't
drives
talk
me
about
crazy.
that.
The fact that Native Americans are the like minorities, but they were here first. Like that bothers me so
Involuntary
much.
I feel like when we learn
Yeah.
American history, we should start with Native American history and like start with that, and then work up and be like, and then these crazy British people showed up, and we're like, haha.
That's like
Yeah.
the confronting colonization and hegemony that we were talking
Mhm.
about.
Exactly. It's
But I
really
have-
crazy.
I have noticed. I don't know if this counts because I guess you're talking more about word choice, but like I've noticed more in like homework help that I've been helping with students, like they're using more like culturally diverse names and like their story prompts have more like different
Ooh,
like
Natalie.
stories that.
boyfriend and a dishwasher.
Oh, so my boyfriend grew up like in a super poor family. They like had not a lot of money at all growing up, and he didn't know what a dishwasher was because they washed
Wash by hand.
dishes by hand. They'd never owned one, and he was taking the wassail when we were little, back when it was called the wassail, and one of the story problems like had dishwasher written in it, and he was like, what is a dishwasher? And he went to ask his teacher, like, what's a dishwasher? And you're not allowed to ask questions really during the washer, so she wasn't able to answer him, and
So he couldn't answer that
couldn't
question.
answer the question because he didn't know what a dishwasher was.
Wow.
So anyway, but they're doing a lot better at tailoring towards
Yeah,
like,
they really
different
are
socioeconomic statuses now.
So I've
Yeah.
noticed a lot of like different cultural names and different like story prompts. That,
Mm-hmm.
That only does so much though.
yeah.
Because it's still like, Jose went to QFC. You know, it's like, okay,
Yeah.
well that's still like really Western.
Yeah.
But like we talk about Christopher Columbus settling America.
Which
Oh,
isn't
I
even what
fucking
happened.
hate Christopher
And
Columbus.
we don't talk about the other side of the story. We don't
Yeah,
talk
at
about the
all.
perspective of the American.
Like,
Not
Yeah.
until
Yeah.
high school, at
If you
least.
see like an
I took
interview
a
with
little
Native
bit of
Americans,
high
they
We talked about it a little bit in high school.
Just a
and
little
high
bit,
school. It was like barely anything.
Yeah, in
Yeah.
American history, I talked about it slightly, but I still am like, I still don't fully understand. Like, obviously, I know Native Americans were here first, but I don't know. Like, they were here, and like, how did that happen? And like, I don't know.
What?
The stuff that isn't written down in history because it's not written
Yeah.
down in
Mm-hmm.
what's the word I'm looking for? Like European history or whatever,
Yeah,
which is
exactly.
basically the history. Like, I remember when I was in elementary school and we were learning about American history, we started with British history. Like, we didn't start with Native American history, we started with British history and was like, oh yeah, and this is the history of France and Spain and England and whatever else, and then we were like, and then they all came to America, and this is the history of America.
And it's like, oh, and then they just claimed it and that was theirs.
and
I
the
was
Native
like,
Americans
no.
kind of disappear
Yeah.
and go to reservations and like fall out of the picture, and it's like, what?
Yeah.
What? How?
They just chose to go live in reservations. I mean, that's what they
Yeah.
wanted to do.
And it was so weird when we learned about Native Americans in my school when I was a little kid. I didn't even understand, but I still feel like bad about it because
They make them so like,
they made
oh, you wear the feathers and you wear this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. That's all. I
and we
remember.
made up our own Native American names, which was
Like
like
wind
Star, Fire, Wind, Feather. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it was so it
Like,
was
you guys
so
ever play
racist.
with like the pilgrim hats
Yeah.
and then like the
Yeah.
Indian hats? And
I did
people would,
that so often, and then like the
Yeah.
Indians are like, and they're just like, okay, there's this one line that my sister always quotes because she was the person that played this like Native American, and then just like, we bring corn or something. And I was like, what?
No, you don't bring corn. You live here.
It's
This
just
is
like
your
we bring it
continent.
like to you, like here. And I was like rewatching
Yeah,
it. Then once I was older, I was like,
Vomit.
oh.
Yeah.
As a kid, you're like, yeah, that's what the Indians are. They're just like these people
Yeah,
that
you don't know
live
any
here.
better.
They're just like,
Yeah, and they're not even Indians.
They
Like, this
also-
isn't India.
yeah.
You thought it was India.
they also make them slightly seem more like not human quite.
Mhm.
Well, they called them
Savages.
They called them
Yeah.
savages,
Yeah.
and I in the 405 class, Joy talks about how, and this happens all over the world, not just with our culture,
Yeah.
but how when you don't understand another culture, you assimilate them or you compare them to like other animals,
Mhm.
Yeah,
and because it's
exactly.
easier, because it's easier to like say,
Yeah.
oh, they're so far away from us, they must be
Like the
like animals,
extermination
kind
of the
thing.
Jews. Like, you have to exterminate
Oh my
bugs,
gosh.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'm not gonna lie. The only thing I'm thinking right now is the song like "Savages."
For
from
Pocahontas.
Pocahontas.
Oh, yeah.
Also, heads up, in 20 minutes we have to go turn the keys
I
back
know
in.
that, yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
we're almost done. Who's
Yeah.
next?
I didn't finish mine. I'll go on the second one really fast. I'm sorry, this always happens. Okay, so the second one was epistemological justice. Alright, it's a mouthful.
Oh, right, that could be split.
And then it's basically how we all deserve the right in our education to be exposed to many different viewpoints that come from many different cultures, and we especially deserve to see our own culture, as in like other people's culture,
Yeah.
not my culture.
Mhm.
Perspectives displayed in school. So like you should see yourself in the curriculum. It's basically reiterating what
Yeah.
I just said.
Yeah.
And so it's talking about how today's education is full of westernized views and has unfairly distorted knowledge and restricted the lenses of people. So
No, you
basically,
mean, like, when we
epistemological racism.
Mhm.
When we teach European history and stuff. Like
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I think as future teachers, though, like we have a huge like opportunity to like combat that a little bit in the next generations. Like even if the school's curriculum or Common Core standards or whatever say you have to teach about Columbus, well, yeah, we can teach about Columbus, but who says we can't also teach about the Native American history and
The
stuff?
thing that scares me about like the first couple years of being a teacher is that once you're, for instance, Miss Conlon told me this all the time. Like once you are known as being a good teacher in your schools, like people know you, you have a name for yourself. You can pretty much do what you want because they know you're a good teacher and they trust you. But in your first couple years, like
You
they
have to
expect
try.
you to follow exactly what they want,
Yeah.
or else you're and
Even
so,
if you don't want to teach what they
Yeah.
want. at all.
Exactly.
And you'll have people coming in like asking you like,
Like, why are you
oh,
doing
what?
this?
Yeah, why are you doing this? Like, what
Why,
standard
yeah,
does this
to
relate
back
to?
it up.
Yeah. and you
Like,
have
it
to
doesn't
back
relate
up
to every
everything they're
standards.
doing, and you can just be like, oh well, this and this and this, and then they can't really say anything, but they're still judging your way you're teaching because
Well, and
You're
you
not-
have to think about parents getting
Exactly.
really mad too, and that kind of thing.
Okay, letter B.
So
Sorry.
B was talking about
Already sorry.
affirming diversity in education as a human right. Is that what the whole thing was called, or just my section? I don't know. Anyway, so they talked about. I wrote down. The meanings of both human rights and local cultural values need to be negotiated via dialogue because they should be subject to diverse interpretation. And then I put my own note. So why should the only interpretation or be portrayed as the white interpretation of history? I noticed that a lot when when I was in school, like looking back on that, is like the only interpretation at all was like white history and like European
Yeah.
history and like for example like, hey, little kids, let's learn about our U.S. history. Let's start in Europe. And the kid who is, like, whose family is from Mexico is like, that's not where I'm from.
Yeah.
Why is that
Stop.
our history? Like,
Yeah.
anyway.
Mm.
Yeah, so getting away from just, like, the white dominant culture.
Was that the only one you had? Okay, cool. I had two, and it was access to quality education for all and just cultural diversity. And access to quality education for all, it was, what?
Sorry. No, we're good.
Okay. So it was like, it was first understood as a natural human right, but the focus is changing from access to quality. And I guess my comments were like, I always heard that those who can't do teach, and it was like a real issue because
Hate
you
that
remember? Did you ever hear
comment.
that?
I hate that
Hate
comment
that.
so much.
And I think it's because there was such a high demand of teachers, regardless of how much you enjoyed being around children or enjoyed education. So it's like, we just need people, just whoever. So if you're not good at anything else, just come be a teacher. We need you.
That's so much hate that phrase. It's like, oh, if you don't know what else to do with your life, just be a teacher. It's really easy. Okay,
Yeah.
no, stop.
It is
Yeah.
so hard.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna punch you, people.
And
Like,
so,
don't say that again.
When the schools desegregated, we made a big step towards full access to education, and teachers started to understand, okay, I have to love all these students. Like, I can't pick and choose. And so now that we're having access to almost everybody, it's important to work on quality. And I was like, if I work on an essay, I'm not going to turn in the rough draft. I'm going to go back and edit and make it
Yeah.
better.
Right.
So we first have to get the access, and then we have to get the quality. So
Cool.
and we're
about
like
that.
in the editing process right now. And that's super
yeah,
cool.
and that's the hard part.
It's
And
like a
everyone-
good place to be, but
we
like
can edit for like 30,000 years, but you know, hopefully it just keeps getting better.
we just have to keep editing. We can't be like,
Sometimes
oh,
you have
this
to
is a little
delete a
bit better.
paragraph, and what else? And then cultural diversity was what exactly what we think it is.
One thing that I remember reading in the article that I found interesting was that, you know, it talks about education for everyone, and then that's a big thing that you hear like all the time, but then it was take a step further and be like cultural
Yeah, so it's
education for
that's
everyone.
that
Like it's
editing,
like
making it
it's
better.
multicultural, so not just education but an actual like education where they're open to
Quality.
other. Yeah.
Yeah, dope.
Alright, guys, that's it. That's all those things
That's all we have to
about.
talk about.
I mean,
Okay,
I thought it
cool.
was gonna be hard to talk about.